色のステックを合わせるとなんだその答えは出ないんです
I think the previous team might have a different answer for you. Behold, everyone! Denshi Sentai Denziman. Battle Fever J, despite its, in my opinion, lackluster quality, was still very successful and gave the Super Sentai formula a new lease of life. The addition of the giant robot turned out to be an amazing idea, and okay, I was wrong, Spider-Man wasn't the first Toku to utilize the giant robot, but it was the show that made it so popular and influenced Toei to use it in Battle Fever. Thank you to everyone in the comments for the correction last time, and also thank you, all of you, for the massive wave of support for the Battle Fever video. When I started this series, the idea that one of my videos could reach 10,000 views felt like a pipe dream. I've been dreaming of making this series for a long time now, and I worked really, really hard on it, so it makes me beyond happy to see it pay off this much. Anyway, the show had far better ratings than Jacka before it, and with the 1980s fast approaching, Toei wanted to keep it going. However, they also wanted to attract even more of an audience. The way they thought to do this was try and appeal to the current trends. What was this trend? Sci-fi. Particularly, the biggest sci-fi sensation that had just been released near the end of the 70s, Star Wars. Toei wanted to make a much more sci-fi oriented show, breaking away from the military aspects of the previous ones. They still had a contract with Marvel going, but this show was actually produced a lot more independently without too much creative control from the company, though they still had input. Unlike Battle Fever, this was a wholly original concept with no Marvel-esque characters being used. Shozo Uehara returned as main writer once again, along with major contribution from Hirohisa Soda, who had written a few episodes of the previous 3 shows, but was far more involved in Denjiman. Koichi Takemoto also returned to the director's chair. This new series would be much less wacky than the previous one. It would expand upon the ideas introduced in Battle Fever, while having its very own unique motif and story. The perfect balance between Battle Fever and Go Ranger, if you will. In terms of the Rangers themselves, it was back to basics. No more Rangers based on different countries, no more weird noses on helmets. We're back to red, blue, yellow, green, pink. The same color combination as Go Ranger. The story would also be the largest in scope we've had so far, being far more rooted in sci-fi conventions than any of its predecessors. Instead of earthly criminal organizations and evil cults, the villains for this show would be an invading alien empire from out of space. Instead of the military organizations of the previous shows, the Rangers' powers would be derived from the futuristic tech of another planet entirely. As you can probably tell, for a couple of years in Sentai's history, it became Toei's mission to create what was essentially Star Wars the Sentai. Denjiman was their first go at the idea. So, did the new direction pay off? Let's find out. As usual, let's start by talking about the opening. Nothing screams 80s sci-fi like synthesizers, synthesizers, and more synthesizers. Jokes aside, I like this opening quite a bit. As we'll see throughout this video, Denjiman innovated the series in a lot of ways, with this song being the first. It's very different from the previous ones, and fits the technological motif of the show very well. We're starting to get out of that 70s brass and entering into the 80s in all its techno glory. It's also really catchy, and that Denjiman gets stuck in your head immediately. It was sung by the late Ken Narita, and he has a very distinct voice, sounding almost robotic. If this song were made nowadays, I can guarantee you they would be auto-tuning the hell out of it. The first episode is called Take the Express to the Super Fortress. We open in space, an instant sign of what we're in for, as the narrator exposits about a giant alien city known as Denjiland, which came to Earth 3,000 years ago, containing not citizens, but a single dog in deep sleep. Now, in the present day, the dog, whose name is IC, awakens from his slumber. He's warned that the Vader clan has arrived on Earth. I firmly believe that that name is not a coincidence. They knew exactly what they were doing calling the villains Vader. It turns out that IC is actually a robot dog, made from technology far too complex for us to understand. We then cut to a man practicing karate in a field when a portal suddenly opens up and fires a laser, blowing up a building. The man runs away as the destruction ensues, but is protected by IC, who puts a force field around him and... okay, that's just a tent. The dog suddenly talks to the man, who we learn is named Akagi Ippei, saying that he's been chosen to become Denji Red. Next, we cut to a tennis field where a woman is playing. The same mysterious portal opens up again and blows up her tennis coach. Jesus Christ! The fact that they show him flailing around in agony as he's burning to death is honestly pretty surprising. This is some early Jacka level stuff. IC once again arrives and tells the woman, Akira Momoi, that she is to become Denji Pink. Next we meet Jun Kiyama, a scientist who arrives on the scene of a meteor crash. He finds IC and is told that he will become Denji Yellow. Then, Tatsuya Midorikawa, a detective who investigates the strange meteorite with his father. It turns out to be an egg, which hatches, revealing a monster. The creature proceeds to kill Tatsuya's father, and if I had a nickel for every time one of the Rangers has been a detective whose father has died in the first episode, I'd have 3 nickels. In a row. IC somehow appears again and tells him to become Denji Green. Seriously, where do you keep popping up from? Finally, we meet a man working in a circus, about to check on the animals, when the monster suddenly creeps up on him and... Oh, what the hell? That's just Shiro. Like, we've had reused actors before, but usually they play a completely different character, or there's enough of a time gap that they look different from how they did before. This guy's name is Daigoro Ome, but this is literally just Kenji Oba playing the exact same role as he did last season, or, from the audience's perspective at the time this came out, last week. There's no way a bunch of kids weren't confused, wondering why this guy who looks and acts exactly like Battle Kenya suddenly has a new name and new background. Anyway, just as he's cornered by the monster, he's saved by IC again, who tells him that he'll become Denji Blue. As you may have noticed, all the Rangers have their respective colors incorporated into their names. Akagi, Kiyama, Midorikawa, Momoi, and Ome, that last one being more noticeable in the kanji. After so much build-up, we finally get to meet this evil Vader clan, who reside in this dark, castle-looking spaceship. They hate all things beautiful and seek to turn Earth into a world of terror. They're led by Queen Hidorian, played by Machiko Soga. As I mentioned in the Battle Fever video, Soga is most known for being the face of Rita Repulsa in MMPR, aka Bandora in Zyuranger. This is her first time as the main villain and won't be her last. Her costume looks very interesting. To quote a very good and informative article I found about the Toei and Marvel collaboration, she seems to be cosplaying as the hella you get when ordering her from Wish. She recites the Snow White verse of Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, which pretty much establishes her personality right off the bat. The mirror turns out to actually be a shapeshifter named Mira. That tracks. We also meet her other servants, another shapeshifter named Kara, who turns into a Keller, and a warrior named General Hedora. Between Heder, Hedorian, and Hedora, it kinda feels like they're starting to run out of name ideas. We learn that the monster is called Flying Squirrel-lar. One thing I like about the monsters in this show is their consistency. All of them have names that end with lar, and they're all numbered, with this one being number 0. Although that does irk me because since this is episode 1 and the monster's number is 0, that means the monster number never matches up with the episode number, ever. Anyway, all the monsters hatch from these big eggs. This particular monster is going around poisoning the air. It also turns giant immediately, which is new. Some officers try to shoot him, but in classic Godzilla fashion, bullets don't work. IC sends out a telepathic signal to the 5 people he talked to and assembles them in the entrance to Denji Land. This place will serve as their base of operations. This mysterious voice in the wall explains that planet Denji was destroyed by the Vader clan 3,000 years ago. They sent out IC to assemble a team that would be capable of taking Vader on, and these 5 have been chosen to become Denshi Sentai Denziman. So, we've gone from our commanders being trained, serious military generals to... dog. Whatever. I love IC. He's a good boy. They all hold their right hands up to this machine that spits out a bunch of rings, landing perfectly on their finger. The rings transform them into Denjiman. Okay, I feel like this is a good time to talk about a certain pet peeve I have with a lot of early Sentai, and that is, I feel like the Rangers get used to being Rangers way too quickly. Like, these people who were living normal lives just a day ago instantly accepted that they've become warriors fighting an evil empire from space. This wasn't really a problem in the previous entries, since those Rangers were all military trained and the villains were actually from Earth, but it feels a lot weirder here. This is an issue that continues to last for a few more seasons. Anyway, the Denji rings are a pretty cool transformation device. I like how inconspicuous they are. They're so small that nobody would bat an eye at them, and they look really nice. They use the Denji Tiger, their flying aircraft, to chase the monster. The Vader clan seemingly recognizes it, and reacts with shock. After the standard dogfight, the Rangers leave the jet and face off against the monster. I'd say now's a good time to talk about the suits. I'm very mixed on these. I like the colors and how vibrant these are compared to the previous ones, and anything is a step up from Battle Fever, but I'm also not a huge fan of them. For starters, we're back to the Go Ranger design of gigantic lines to indicate rank, and it has the exact same problem here as it did in that show. Red only has one line, so he looks alright, but the more you go along, the more cluttered it gets. I also don't like that these lines go under their arms, it just makes their armpits look weird. I'm really not a fan of their gloves and boots either. These weird chrome lines just look like duct tape. Why do these suits not have anything on their back? It looks weirdly empty. The Go Ranger and Jakka suits had capes, and the Battle Fever suits had little designs on the back, so these ones look off in comparison. I know there's plenty of Sentai suits later in the franchise that don't have anything on their backs, but these ones just look off for some reason. Maybe it's because the lines don't go all the way around. They also have scarves again, which are just as floppy and messy as they were before. Once again, the washing machine strikes back. As the show goes on, the white stripes progressively start blending with the color, kind of the opposite of what happened with Battle France's suit last time. If there's anything I do like about these suits, it's the helmets. I honestly don't think these look too bad. Sure, they're very big and bulky, but I also think they look pretty sleek compared to what came before. I like how the different shapes on their foreheads change the look of the visors. Speaking of which, we actually have proper see-through visors instead of the ones made from the same material as the rest of the helmet. Well, most of the time. Sometimes they go back to the old style, and it's very noticeable. The lips also look a lot more stylized and less realistic than usual, which I think makes them look better. Though I have to say, those are some massive chins. So yeah, I don't hate these suits, but they're not great overall. They're aggressively mediocre. As usual, we get a fun little fight scene with each ranger showing off their moves with some neat special effects. One of the most fun things about making these videos so far has been tracking the evolution of Sentai's action choreography and special effects. We've come a long way from Go Ranger's slow, sluggish first fight scene is what I'm saying. The foot soldiers in this one are called Dustlers, and I gotta say, they look pretty cool. It's a simple design, but effective, a black suit with half of it being covered with a skeleton design. They also wield scythes, so this whole thing gives off a Grim Reaper vibe. This is certainly the best Mook design we've had since Go Ranger. This first battle takes place in a fishing port. I really like it when battles have unique and interesting locations. It allows for creative uses of their environments. Like this scene where Blue hops around this chain. They use their signature move, the Denshi Punch, where they get these big metal boxing gloves to punch things with. Looks pretty cool. It's kinda silly, but I like it.
Denziman は100メートルを3秒で走ることができる。
You can tell because we're playing the clip in slow motion. They're really leaning into the superhero aspect, showing off how powerful the Denziman team is. They can run really fast, they can jump really high, they have X-ray vision. I mean, they can see into other dimensions, because that makes way more sense. To finish it off, they use their finisher, the Denshi Boomerang, where they throw their Denshi sticks together to form a big boomerang. Pretty much just like the Pentaforce Boomerang, and I'm pretty sure they even use the exact same effect from Battle Fever. Right after being defeated, the monster turns giant. It starts wrecking everything around it, blowing up buildings all over the place. The team launches the Denshi fighter where it transforms into the giant robot, Dai Denjin. Yes, instead of the slow build-up we had with Battle Fever, where it took a few episodes for us to get the mech, this time we're just getting it straight in the first episode. I don't like that. I feel like the build-up in Battle Fever made the eventual appearance of the mech way more satisfying. You don't even need to wait that long, just introduce the mech in episode 2 or something. You'll find that I'm not a big fan of when the mechs get introduced in episode 1 unless there's a good story justification. I talked in the last episode about how the mech fights feel forced at times, and this definitely isn't beating the allegations. It just doesn't add anything. If you use the mech every single episode, it stops being special. This is a problem that Sentai has always had, and only very recently have they started mixing it up a little. Well, whatever, it can't be helped, so we just have to live with it and get used to it. What I'm not used to is how terrible this mech looks. Oh my god, how did this happen? The Battle Fever Robo was so cool and sleek and good looking. How do we go from that to this giant cardboard box? They really did blow all their budget designing the Battle Fever mech, huh? The only thing here that looks even slightly decent is the head. The body, on the other hand, I mean, I like the colors, I guess, but that doesn't really matter when the whole thing looks like it's about to fall apart if the wind gets too strong. Look at this one picture. It literally looks like the upper body is about to fall over. The arms are also really weird looking, and I can't put my finger on why. I think it's because the hands are just way too big. They look like blue baseball gloves or something. The weapon variety on this robot is also lacking compared to Battle Fever. We have our standard sword and a mace, and that's it. Considering the Battle Fever one had like 50 different weapons, this is more than a downgrade. They use their finisher, Electric Full Moon Slash, and take out the monster for good. Instead of the usual thing where they slash the monster's whole body and it explodes, this time they straight up cut off its head. Damn. Now I just have to figure out if my mother exists. Cutting back to Vader, Queen Hedorian is informed that Denjiman has returned. That's a neat little bit of mythology. So there actually was a Denjiman team before the one we have now. They were likely defeated by Vader when the original planet Denji was destroyed. Regardless of what happened to the old ones, the new Denjiman team is formed and ready to take on Vader. The ending theme this time around absolutely slaps, and I am genuinely dumbfounded. It is insane how good this song is. It's so fast-paced and catchy, and you can't help but sing along. The slightly repetitive lyrics actually work in its favor and make it easier to do so. Like, are we sure this is a Showa-era song? Once again, Ken Narita's voice gives this song a very technological feel, and the instruments certainly help too, with all the little wah 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 wah. This is also just the perfect theme to use in fight scenes, which they do a lot. It makes the action feel so much more exciting. So yeah, this one is an absolute banger, and I rarely ever skipped it. The soundtrack for Denjiman, much like the opening and ending, is a lot more synth-oriented, but it still has that classic Chume Watanabe feel. We also have a lot of tracks from Battle Fever being reused here, which I'm okay with since I love those tracks. Although there are points where it feels a little out of place, some of these tracks, as much as I like them, don't really feel like they belong in this show. You can tell they were ripped straight from Battle Fever since they still have that late 70s pop style to them. Still good though. As it turns out, the reason Queen Hidorian wants to wipe out all beauty on Earth is because she wants to be the most beautiful thing in existence, very much akin to the evil queen from the story of Snow White. That's the pettiest motivation for any villain ever, and I love it. I also really like the monster design for episode 2, Soplar. It literally just makes bubbles, and it's incredible. It also has this glorious sound effect. The villains this time are generally more active than usual. Pretty much every episode sees Mira and Kara going out enacting plans alongside the monster, which is something we started seeing more of with Salome last time, but it's a lot more prominent here. In this episode, Akira considers leaving the team because she wants to pursue her tennis aspirations and because she thinks she owes it to her coach who died in the first episode. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier when I said the Rangers accept this whole thing way too easily, and it's nice to see the show actually exploring that. I like that they actually let one of them hesitate and doubt whether they should really be participating in this battle because, unlike in the previous shows, the Denjiman aren't military-trained soldiers or have any personal stake in the fight. They're just regular, albeit extremely talented people who got roped into this. I kinda wish they had shown some of this doubt in the first episode, but alas, we really needed that mech fight. Of course, the episode ends with her deciding to commit to being a hero and rejoining the team. It's a nice little story. There's one particular aspect about this show that I want to get into more later, but for now, I should probably introduce it. Children are kind of a big part of this one. More so than usual. Each of the Rangers actually teaches classes based around their respective talents, and this ties into what I think is a core theme of Denjiman. But again, we'll talk about that later. Instead of the standard Child of the Week type episodes where a child character is introduced as a one-off character that needs the Rangers' help, Denjiman gives us a consistent supporting cast of child characters. Sure, Go Ranger and Battle Fever both had recurring characters who were kids, but these ones feel a lot more involved. We do still have episodes with one-off child characters here and there, but the fact that this specific group of kids keeps reappearing means they can get a lot more development, and for the most part, they do. There's some really good episodes revolving around them, not only as a group, but as individuals. Each of these kids participate in the Rangers' classes, particularly Akagi's martial arts class. I'll talk more about them as we go, but for now, let's get their basic personalities. Genichi, the leader of the group, is a bit of a slacker who hates studying and prefers to do his own thing. Then we have Santa, whose father actually taught Akagi martial arts. As such, Akagi is a lot more protective of him. Hiroshi and Katsuo are the two least memorable ones. They really don't get as much to do as the other ones, so I'm not really going to talk about them much. Finally, Yumiko is probably the most developed of the bunch. She's part of Akira's swimming classes, and she's usually the voice of reason for the kids, often being against some of their more reckless ideas. Again, we'll talk about this later, but this group does tie into something I noticed about Denjiman. Episode 4 introduces us to Daikaro's sister, Sachiko, who performs at the same circus as him. Not much to say about her, but she makes a couple appearances in the show early on. Her actress is going to be important next time, though. As much as I've been complimenting the effects in this show so far, they can get a little off sometimes. I mean, what is this? And this! In episode 7, we get a little more background about Planet Denji and its destruction. It turns out the Vader monsters that destroyed Planet Denji were far more powerful than the ones being dispatched now. The episode revolves around Vader trying to poison the Earth's water and turn everything that comes in contact with it to stone. Icy seems to be far more unnerved than usual at these attacks. The voice in the computer explains that this particular monster destroyed Planet Denji by using the exact same tactic. As the water began to rot and the planet's environment was destroyed, the greatest scientists of Denji created Daidenshin as a means of fighting back, but at that point it was already too late, and their planet was doomed. The only thing they could do was evacuate what little survivors there were to Earth and try to immigrate. But even that plan went awry when Vader caught up to them and killed them all. IC was the only one who was saved, where he landed on Earth like we saw in episode 1. The voice speaking is apparently a program created to preserve the memories of everything that happened. So yeah, talk about raising the stakes. If it wasn't obvious already, the Vader clan is far, far more powerful and threatening than any of the villains from the previous shows. All of those guys were based on Earth and had to work from the shadows to amass their powers. Vader, on the other hand, already destroyed an entire planet prior to the start of the show, and who knows how many more. As I said, this show is on a much grander scale than anything that has come before, and this will be the status quo going forward for the franchise. The team, of course, manages to figure out a plan to destroy the monster, saving Earth from suffering the same fate as planet Denji before it. This is a great episode, and it's very intense as the planet is closer to destruction than ever before. Episode 8 features a monster with a human form, played by Mitsuo Ando, who played the Black Cross Fuhrer in Go Ranger, and they don't try to hide it, even referencing Go Ranger at a few points. This is also just a fun episode overall, with Daigoro and the kids getting turned into old people. I gotta say, Kenji Yoba wears that long white beard well. This is one of those episodes where the Rangers get trapped in a movie setting and keep changing genres. There's a lot of those in a lot of different shows, but to my knowledge this is the first time it's been done in Sentai. Episode 10 is about Vader making everyone in town addicted to hamburgers. I mean, hamburg-cars as they call it. The monster is just a giant hamburger, and the people who eat his burgers become incredibly aggressive and wanting more. This episode lives in my head rent-free. Every now and then I'll just think of the burger monster. And then in the next episode, Vader steals a bunch of kids' souls. This has the same tonal consistency as Xana from Code Lyoko, going from possessing a giant teddy bear to trying to nuke the planet in the span of 2 episodes. Episode 12 aired on April 19th, which is my birthday 27 years before I was born. It introduces us to Chiko Matsuo, a police officer working with Tatsuya. She'll be a recurring character throughout the rest of the show, and she pretty much serves as the clueless bystander who often gets roped into the episode's shenanigans against her will. She's a fun enough character, and she has a partner who gets introduced in a later episode, but there's not much else to say. Episode 13 is pretty interesting as it shows us a monster that isn't all bad. Ado Balular is initially sent by Vader to retrieve poisonous gas from a lab so he can use his balloons to spread it. He disguises himself as a sweet old man to fit in. He ends up running into the scientist's daughter, however, and grows to become quite protective of her. Despite this, Vader still ends up controlling him, and the Denji men have to destroy him. It's honestly kinda sad. Episode 14 doesn't have a mech fight. Wow, that's pretty awesome. I don't even know why, but I'm not complaining. That's a breath of fresh air. In episode 19, Genichi leaves. He leaves the show. In universe, he leaves because his dad got a new job in a different region, but it's completely unknown why the child actor left the role. I don't think we ever will know, since very little is known about where any of these kids are now. Regardless, I already touched on his character, and he had some decent focus episodes at this point, so he's worth mentioning. Episode 21 tricked me into thinking we were getting a brand new villain faction with this cool biker gang, but it turns out they were just working for Vader. In episode 22, the monster traps Tatsuya in a time loop, and fittingly, that's a TARDIS. Denji Man actually had a theatrical movie released in the same way that the previous shows did. Normally, I wouldn't even bother talking about it, since they tend to just feel like filler episodes in a higher resolution. Hell, sometimes that's quite literally what they are. But this time around, the movie is actually important? Not only that, but it's actually 45 minutes long, being about double the runtime of previous Sentai movies. This movie is kind of the first iteration of what will one day become the summer movie tradition, with the current airing Sentai and Rider shows getting a fun little movie released during the summer months. The opening theme here is extended to its full 2.5-minute runtime with some new visuals pertaining to what we're about to see. We open with Godzilla. Well, okay, it's not Godzilla, but I mean, look at it. It rises from the water and slowly approaches a beach. It straight up eats a couple people as the Denji men launch to the rescue. I gotta say, the movie quality looks pretty good here. Not quite as good as Go Ranger's movie, but still. They try to lure the monster out, but to no avail. Apparently, it turns out none of the people were actually eaten, they just got captured. They're taken aboard a pirate ship and forced to try spinning the wheel, and one woman has a unique reaction. It's revealed that this ship belonged to the Denjians. It was left on Earth 3,000 years ago. Only one of them would be capable of steering it, meaning this woman is a descendant of planet Denji, with her daughter sharing that blood. My god, the visuals of this sequence are really beautiful. I love the rainbow colors. The kid gets attacked by a monster trying to steal this rainbow stone from planet Denji, and the team come to help. They save her and escape back to Denjiland. The computer explains that the stone was brought to Earth by Princess Denji. Princess Denji? That's like naming our leaders President Earth or something. When the evacuation took place, she escaped to another planet rather than Earth, but was again followed by Vader. No one actually knows what happened to her, but she did eventually arrive on Earth. Side note, but I really like the soundtrack they play whenever they talk about Princess Denji. It's very serene and beautiful. The boat Vader is trying to control belonged to Princess Denji herself. I have to say, this is some of the most interesting mythology we've had in Sentai up until now. The previous shows never had this type of backstory behind them. It's really cool to see a slightly more elaborate plotline. From this point, the plot of the movie becomes protect the really powerful Rainbow Stone from Vader. Hadrian tries to lure the girl to a beach by using her psychic powers to communicate through the stone, but Akira intercepts it and goes herself, followed by the team, where she proceeds to get captured and Vader takes the stone. Vader creates a plan of attack against the team, and they use what seem to be actual Denjiman action figures sold in stores, as well as the mech toys. I guess that's one way to advertise your toy line. Akira is made to be used as a test dummy for the stone's power, but the rest of the team arrives just in time. The fight ensues, and the Rangers take on the monster until it begins using the stone's power and overwhelms them. Just when it seems like they're going to be destroyed, IC comes in, driving the Denji Tiger, and blasts the monster. Look how happy he looks, too. What a wonderful pupper. They manage to take it down as well as its giant form, and all's well that ends well. This is a pretty good movie. It actually justifies being a movie instead of just another episode. It has a longer runtime, it looks visually really nice, it's actually plot relevant, as it's our introduction to Princess Denji, who we'll continue to hear more about as the show goes on. It's just really solid. It's not perfect, of course, it can drag a bit at times, and there's an entire section dedicated to what's basically a clip show for the previous episodes, but overall, I'm proud to say this is our first good Sentai movie. Well, okay, the Bomb Hurricane wasn't that bad, but it wasn't very notable either. I'm proud to say this is our very first notable Sentai movie. Back to the show, episode 26 expands on the Princess Denji plotline further. A friend of Tatsuya's named Go Koyuki creates a song that becomes a new hit single, Ginga Honey. It turns out the song was based on an ancient disc Go found one day. The song was originally created by Princess Denji, and it has the power to put anyone who hears it in a good mood. Go remixed it and released it to the public. Because of its origins, the Vader clan target Go, and it's up to the Denjimen to protect him. I remember this song really got stuck in my head for a while after watching the episode. It's a banger. Honey, honey. Episode 27 features a poster for Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back in the background at one point, just in case it wasn't obvious enough what this show is inspired by. Episode 29 introduces us to yet another descendant of the Denjians, a friend of Akagi's named Paul, who's also a detective and can see the future and... Oh god. He's back. Yeah, this guy is played by Narimitsu Kurachi, who previously played Battle France. If it was just the actor, that'd be a different story, but this character is basically Shida in all but name. The actor gives the exact same performance that he did in Battle Fever. He's just as flamboyant, just as carefree, just as... French.
Oh, それはtrès bien.
I kept expecting him to transform during the whole episode. Anyway, this is the 200th episode of Sentai as a whole. I can't believe we're already 200 episodes in, and nearly half of that is just Go Ranger. Episode 32 is about an assassin monster trying to snipe down each of the Denjimen one by one. It's pretty intense. That's one hell of a calling card. Episode 36 is a really good focus episode for Yukiko of all characters. She finds a stray dog in the park, and with the help of Jun, Denji Yellow decides to raise it. They name him Goro, and they have to keep him in a warehouse since Yukiko isn't allowed to have a dog at home, but they promise to come visit him every day. But the next day, he's not there. Jun tries to find him, but ends up getting captured by Vader. Since Yukiko doesn't know about the Denjimen's identities, she just assumes he lied about helping Goro and gave up. Once she realizes what happened, she feels extremely guilty, and the actress honestly sells it pretty well. It's rare to get great child actors in this show, but it works out here. At the end of the day, it's Goro who ends up saving the day when he leads everyone to Jun's location. This is just a really wholesome episode, and one of the ones I remember the most. On a slightly more serious note, it was during the filming of this episode that the real dog who played IC up to this point sadly passed away, being replaced by a different dog for the remainder of the show. He died of natural causes and lived a full, happy dog life, but it's still sad. Rest in peace. He was the bestest of boys. Episode 37 is pretty darn important. One night, a mysterious entity arrives on Earth, one that even Queen Hedorian seems to be frightened by. As the Denjiman team gets attacked by an unknown force, Hedorian suspects that this is the work of Demon King Banriki. Right off the bat, this is a great introduction. The fact that this guy hasn't even shown up yet and he's already got the main villains of the show quaking in their boots instantly establishes him as someone not to be messed with. He targets each of the Rangers on separate occasions, and okay, that's a swastika. Here I thought Jacko was the only one. While Akagi and Akira are chasing the suspicious car, the man finally makes his appearance, and he's got an interesting design. He almost looks like a dark, twisted version of a gladiator with that armor. His mask only covers about half of his face, with the rest being all tattooed, and he's got this big shield on his arm. He also has giant retractable claws that he can throw at people and a gigantic sword. Akagi tries to fight him head on, but none of his attacks seem to faze him. They're forced to retreat back to base to figure out how the hell they're going to deal with this guy. IC explains that Demon King Banriki is a fearsome warlord who will destroy anything and anyone that stands in his way. He also had a thing against planet Denji, which is why he's now targeting our team. Cutting back to Vader's lair, Banriki shows up and immediately asserts his power, blowing things up, throwing everyone around, and pretty much wrecking the place. Queen Hidorian intervenes, threatening to destroy him. He just casually shrugs it off. He reveals that he came to Earth after a deep sleep to destroy the remaining Denjians and their descendants. No, that's the other guy. He agrees to help Vader out with defeating the Denjiman, but anyone can tell he's got his own agenda, and the rest of the clan is incredibly suspicious of him. Upon figuring out where Banriki's next attack will be, Akagi decides to go fight him again, even though Akira still hasn't recovered from her injuries in the previous battle, and is in no shape to exert herself. IC is very reluctant to let them fight again in this state, but they go anyway. Akira wakes up and realizes they went without her. She goes against IC's wishes and rejoins them, giving them a fighting chance. They manage to take on Banriki, but then he turns giant. They fight him in the giant robot as per usual, but instead of finishing him off like usual, he blocks their sword and escapes. He returns to Vader and decides to stay with them until Denjiman is destroyed, leaving our heroes concerned at the thought of a great new threat. This episode is really good. It does a fantastic job introducing Banriki as a powerful new villain. It's pretty intense, with the team being incapacitated for a good bit, and it even provides some nice characterization for the Vader clan, as they appear reluctant to let Banriki join them. In the next episode, the monster uses a machine to create a pocket dimension that he traps people in. This machine is Agos' monster-making machine from Battle Fever, because I guess they didn't feel like making a new prop that day. For the next few episodes, Banriki just kind of sits around Vader's lair drinking booze and making fun of them whenever their plans fail. I have to appreciate the sheer balls of this guy to essentially come into a stranger's home unannounced just to annoy the crap out of them. He occasionally comes up with plans, but he doesn't really go out in the field much for a bit. In episode 43, Akira has a sequence where she puts on a bunch of different disguises to trick the monster. This is a weirdly recurring trend with female rangers, where many of them will have focus episodes just like this, where they disguise themselves as a bunch of different things. I think it's supposed to market to little girls and show them all the different jobs they could have. It's pretty fun and cute, and I always enjoy these scenes when they happen. Episode 45 is titled Princess Denji Was Two People. It sees the appearance of Yuko Ariake, a preschool teacher who's targeted by Vader Clan because she just so happens to be the spitting image of Princess Denji. The Denji men are also alerted to this and vow to protect her, thinking she's the real deal. She turns out to not be Princess Denji, but just a random woman who looks like her. And this is where we get to my main gripe with the show's plot. Yes, I've been praising this one for its great world building and pretty intriguing mystery, but unfortunately, this is where that mystery ends. We're about to get to the final stretch of the show, and I'll just tell you right now, the Princess Denji plotline is completely forgotten about after this episode. We never find out what happened to her or where she went. She just disappears from the show, and I don't really know why. Maybe they got too ambitious and didn't have time to tie up this story in the finale, we'll never know. But it's the one thing that really irks me about this storyline. Regardless, we're in the endgame now. Episode 48 begins the finale of the show. It starts off as a pretty normal episode, with Vader sending out a soccer-based monster to fight the team, but it seems someone leaked the plan to them beforehand, so they come prepared and quickly dispatch the monster. Hidorian is pissed and instantly starts looking for the traitor. She suspects Banriki from the get-go since he's been pretty terrible from the start, and she wouldn't put this past him. As their plans keep failing for weird reasons, Hedora gets into a fight with Banriki, which escalates more and more until they both turn giant and start fighting on top of the city. They run around town, chasing each other. It's a pretty fun action sequence. Eventually, they return to base, and Hedorian tries to resolve the fight, but Banriki has a plan. He commands Soccerlar to shoot out this gas that incapacitates everyone, capturing them and leaving him to rule Vader on his own. I gotta respect the sheer power of this guy to be able to completely overthrow the main villains of the show in one fell swoop. While he's distracted, Hedorian uses her crystal ball to bring a bunch of monsters to life and attack him, where he sicks Soccerlar on them, but they all just end up turning giant. That's the second time this episode we've had a giant battle without Denjiman being around, which I think is pretty awesome. The rest of the clan uses the distraction to contain Banriki and punish him in one of the most bizarre ways I've ever seen. They freeze him in candle wax and slowly burn out this candle to melt him. Pretty hardcore. However, Banriki is still very much conscious and planning his next move. This episode is such a breath of fresh air. I don't think we've had an episode in Sentai so far that was purely about the villains and their own inner conflicts. Sure, the Rangers do stuff in this episode. They fight a monster and use a giant robot, but that is very much the side plot here. We're focusing a lot more on the villains than we ever had before, and I'm completely here for it. I'll get into the Vader clan later when we talk about characters, but I really like these guys. General Hedora comes up with a plan to take out each of the Rangers one by one. He manages to capture all of them except for Akagi. We get a really cool fight scene between the two where they chase each other around this theme park. I said it before, but I love it when they use the fight locations in creative ways like this. They climb up this ride and fight on top of the platforms, it's awesome. He eventually manages to free the others and they beat the monster. Vader notices that one of their eggs is acting weird, but before they can figure out what's going on, it hatches and frees Banriki, who proceeds to take over the castle again. This game of tug-of-war from control between Vader and Banriki is a pretty big part of the final stretch of episodes. After a recent string of attacks where no monsters were to be found, just foot soldiers, our heroes begin to wonder what's up. IC deduces that something must be going on at Vader. Of course, what's going on is that Banriki is just lazing around all day drinking booze instead of making monsters. And yes, they do explicitly call it booze. Instead of throwing the rest of the clan in a cell again, he actually lets them walk free just to flex on them even more. Mira decides to take matters into her own hands, spiking Banriki's drink with poison, but Banriki's pet octopus monster thing stops any of those plans. Hedora decides to go fight the Denziman himself as a way to beat Banriki at his own mission, even being willing to die to accomplish this, something Queen Hedrian is thoroughly against. Even with her protests, though, he still goes off. He tries to fight Akagi, but gets knocked out embarrassingly fast, leading to a scolding from Banriki, who goes ahead to fight the team himself. Okay, that's really funny. He manages to block their ability to summon the giant robot, and it all seems hopeless. Seeing as Banriki is getting dangerously close to winning this fight, Hedora decides to use the Blade of Vader, which I guess exists now, to turn himself into a monster, with a sorrowful goodbye to Queen Hedorian. He turns giant and challenges the team, with Banriki turning off the block to let them summon Denjin again. After a relatively standard mech battle, Hedora is cut down, but the Denjiman respect his resolve and realize that Banriki has completely overtaken Vader, as they prepare to face him down for the final battle. This leads us into the final episode. Episode 51, titled Resound Bells of Hope. The Vader clan is at their worst, as Banriki is becoming increasingly insufferable, lazing about, treating the rest of the group like crap, and forcing them to entertain him. Hedorian challenges him to actually do something and defeat the Denjimen, so he sends out his monster, which, much like last time, gets really close to taking the team out, much to Hedorian's dismay, to the point where Denjin is completely wrecked and they have to retreat. IC says that the robot is broken beyond repair, as they don't have any of the spare parts they would need to fix it. Even still, when Banriki starts wreaking havoc again, the team is more than ready to fight him, with or without the mech, but IC locks the door and prevents them from going out. Dude, this is like the second time you've done this. You should know by now they're not gonna budge. It doesn't help that Banriki is specifically trying to lure Denjiman out, so the longer they stay, the more harm he'll cause. Once again, the rest of the clan try to rise up, with Hedorian trying and failing to stab Banriki. When Banriki fights back, Kara stands in the way and takes the shot, sacrificing herself to protect her queen. Mira, on the other hand, seems to have betrayed Hedorian and stands by Banriki, with Hedorian getting thrown into a cell. The team begs IC to let them go, and after a lot of convincing, he finally budges. It turns out Mira didn't actually join Banriki, she was just trying to get close to him and figure out his weakness. She goes to Hedorian and reveals that Banriki's pet monster has a weak point in its tail. In one of the pettiest moments in the whole show, Hedorian sends a psychic message to IC to tell him this. I love that she's genuinely willing to work with her mortal enemies just to get rid of this one guy. All of a sudden, Denji Tiger gets launched, with the team assuming IC must have repaired it somehow. They fight the monster and hear IC's voice telling them to attack its tail, finally allowing them to cut down this thing. And Hedorian's reaction to this is just gold. Banriki is pissed and tries to attack her, but Mira protects her, getting killed herself in the process. Despite this, she did weaken him a bit, so he's open to attack. Good thing he conveniently stumbles right into where the Denjimen are standing so they can use their finisher on him. Okay, I guess. Then our heroes jump into the air and fly up to Vader's lair where they go inside and... Wait, they could do that this whole time? Why didn't this come up before? Regardless, they go inside, where they come face to face with Queen Hedrian, or at least a vision of her, and we get an honestly kinda sad scene where she laments the fact that all her teammates are dead and she's all alone, saying she's leaving for a while to rest. Even still, she promises to one day return and face off against Denjiman once more. A promise that, due to circumstances beyond Toei's control, she wouldn't get to keep. The castle explodes and the team returns to base to tell IC about their victory, but the dog isn't there. When they check on Daidenjin, they realize what happened. They didn't have the parts needed to fix the mech, so the only way IC could have done it was if he used parts from his own body. IC sacrificed himself to give the team a fighting chance, and we get an emotional little farewell scene as he appears to them on the monitor. Cut to presumably a few months later, and the team is playing soccer in a tournament dedicated to IC's memory, finally being at peace after the long, hard battle. Once more, the narrator does his thing, and signs off the show as our heroes stare off into the sunset. Alright, I've got quite a bit to say about this finale, but let me start by saying it is leagues above anything the previous 3 shows have given us. For the first time in Sentai history, we have a final episode that doesn't suck. That's not to say this episode doesn't have its fair share of issues, I'll get to that, but it was generally quite good. And a lot of that goodness comes from the villains. I really like the Vader clan's whole story throughout these episodes. The fact that it's them who end up doing most of the work and taking Banriki down is really neat and pretty rare for villains in these shows, especially in the Showa era. IC's death admittedly also tugged at my heartstrings. People joke about Denjiman's mentor being a dog, but IC was genuinely really good throughout this show. He was very active in trying to help the Rangers, and he was just adorable. I like that we have a 4-parter as a finale. It makes it feel a lot less rushed than usual, and we have some more time to flesh out a lot of the plot points. That final scene with Hedorian is honestly a bit sad. Sure, she's a villain and she's far from redeemed, she still wants to conquer the world and everything, but you can tell she really cared for the other Vader members, and she feels genuinely upset that they're all gone. Her final words to the team, vowing to return, is set up for next season since we have a bit of an unusual occurrence next time around, but we'll get to it later. That said, this finale does have a few problems. For one, I feel like the whole conflict between Hedora and Banriki is a little dragged out. Don't get me wrong, I do like it as a plot point, but it could have been slightly shorter. Then maybe the next issue could have been fixed too, that being, Banriki gets defeated way too easily at the end. Yes, just like Shine and Satan Agos before him, Banriki gets taken out by a single blast from the team. Sure, he lasted quite a bit longer than those other guys, but still, you're telling me that a single shot from Mira and then the Denji Boomerang was enough to take this guy down? After everything this guy did, after all the trouble he went through, this is how he gets taken out? It's just a little underwhelming. Still, this is easily the best finale we've had so far for the series, so I won't be too harsh. Now let's talk about our characters, starting with Denji Red, Ippei Akagi, played by Shinichi Yuki. He's not the most interesting character out there, none of them really are, but I still like him quite a bit more than his predecessor from Battle Fever. Once again, we've got the standard leader archetype, and he's very reminiscent of Tsuyoshi from Go Ranger. He was a passionate leader and tough fighter who always did what was right. Next we have Daigoro Ome, Denji Blue. He is basically the same character as Shiro from Battle Fever, and Kenji Oba is just as good here as he was in that show, but the actual character isn't quite as good as Shiro, I don't think. That's mostly a fault of the show itself, though. Daigoro never really got the standout emotional episode that Shiro did, which left him feeling a bit less deep, but he was still just as funny and charming, and he still has that awesome animal fighting style. He also had an interesting obsession with Anpan, which doesn't really add up to anything, but it is a thing he does.
Honto? Honto ni Anpan nai no?
Tatsuya Midorikawa was played by Naoya Uchida, and he was probably my least favorite of the cast. He had that whole thing with his father dying, and he had some interesting focus episodes, like the time travel one, but I don't really remember much about him, aside from Detective. Still, he wasn't annoying or anything, but he's probably on par with someone like Daichi from Jaka, maybe slightly better. Jun Kiyama was Denji Yellow. He was played by Eiichi Tsuyama. He was a scientist and inventor and was often the brains of the team. He stands out less for his character and more because he has some of my favorite episodes in the show, like the aforementioned dog episode, or the one where this girl gets possessed by a monster and tries to take him out on a date. That one has some pretty hilarious scenes. Otherwise, he wasn't all that interesting, but that kinda goes for everyone else too. Finally, we have Akira Momoi, played by Akira Koizumi. Again, there's not too much to say about her. She did have some good focus episodes, especially the one near the beginning with her doubting her resolve to be a hero. That was some great stuff. Or that time she met a descendant of an ancient underwater race and helped him find his roots. But there's not too much else to her. She wasn't as well developed as Peggy or even Karen for that matter. As I've said, I thought IC was a pretty good mentor figure. His technical know-how and knowledge of Planet Denji's history meant he always had a way to help the team, and he also did well in giving advice on more personal matters. He truly was best boy, and I will miss him greatly. Despite the heroes not being super well developed, I still thought they worked very well for this particular show for one sole reason, and that is the fact that these characters are much more explicitly role models than any Rangers we've had before. Think about it. These guys are super talented in their fields, they each teach classes, and they're always helping out these kids with their problems. One of the reasons I think the child characters worked so well here is because of their relationship with the Rangers. A lot of the episodes involve them getting into trouble because of their own selfishly fueled mistakes, and the Rangers swoop in, save the day, and teach them a lesson. In a way, I think one of the core aspects of this show is all about teaching the next generation and guiding them to become good people, to inspire the kids watching at home to become just like their heroes, the Denjiman. Once you view the show through that lens, it becomes really charming to watch sometimes. However, the real stars of this show for me were the villains. The Vader clan are really, really good, especially compared to their predecessors from the previous shows. Queen Hedorian is a consistently entertaining character, and Machiko Soga does a fantastic job on her performance, nailing not only the funny moments, but also being genuinely threatening when she needs to be, as well as doing great in the emotional scenes in the finale. Mira and Kara were pretty good in their own right, not quite as awesome as Salome, but I liked how they had an active role in every episode, and were always out there causing trouble. I also really like their undying devotion to Queen Hedorian, with both of them laying down their lives to protect her. And Hedorian's reaction to their deaths is honestly heartbreaking. You can really feel how much she genuinely cared about them. General Hedora was probably the weakest link of the bunch. He wasn't bad, but he was just kind of there for most of the show, until the finale where he finally stepped up to try and take down Banriki. And those scenes are really good. I just wish he'd had more to do before that. He did go out to fight the Rangers a few times, but he didn't really leave much of an impression on me until the end. Of course, the standout villain here aside from Hedorian is Demon King Banriki. In his very first episode, the man showed up, kicked the heroes' asses, went to the Vader castle and kicked their asses too, and proceeded to take over the entire show. His actor was Kin Omai, and he delivers a fittingly hateable performance. He's constantly talking down to the other members of the clan, and he really loves his booze. He is a completely unsympathetic character, which contrasts pretty well with the more emotional rest of the villains. So yeah, overall, Denjiman is a pretty big step up from the previous shows. It's a lot more in line with Go Ranger in terms of tone and presentation, but it has a lot more of an overarching story that, aside from a few issues I highlighted, works pretty well overall. It's also just a ton of fun to watch on an individual episode level. The characters are charming, the action is fun, and there's an overall vibe of happiness that you can't help but like, despite the show's faults. And with Denjiman's success, the yearly Sentai formula is now in full swing, and Toei is already getting ready for their next endeavor, the final of the Marvel Trilogy. This next show would be a sequel of sorts to Denjiman, and attempt to tie up some of the loose ends left by the end of the show. A sequel season is a pretty rare occurrence in Toku, but Toei had already pulled it off once with Kamen Rider V3 being a direct continuation of the original show. Did they do it again? Let's find out as the sun rises on our next Sentai, Taiyo Sentai Sun Vulcan. Maybe it's because the lines don't go all well.